So I have a really quick sort of demo. There's 28 of us. It's a little bit more like our actual numbers, which is looking good. We are live, so your phone should be put away. Good morning, or welcome back. Your phone should be put away. Your distracting tabs closed, especially in the back. You're on honor rules where I can't see you. Um, we're going to talk about Unit 0. Unit 0 is just some of our computer basics, some baselines that we need to set before we get into graphic design. The official projects, which will start tomorrow. I have, or whenever your next block period is. I have some examples that I'm going to show off so that you can see in more detail what you guys are going to be working towards. But let's get into this real quick. This will help you most easily pass your quiz coming up, or not coming up, but this one right here. Okay, so I just want to quickly go over, have a quick talk sesh about a couple things that are going to help you have the best possible experience in graphic design. The routines is the first thing that I want to start with. Sorry for the hiccups. You guys should be arriving to class on time, prepared to use the time provided, either listening to me or working on your projects, which you guys are already really good at, but it is just something that I'm expecting. You always want to check that OneDrive sync, especially in these first couple weeks. You want to make sure that your OneDrive cloud is blue and that all your assignments are correctly syncing so that you don't lose your work, just in case anything happens, and you have access to it wherever you need. Okay, so that's the biggest thing. The biggest routine I want to establish is just, hey, come on time, come prepared to work. That's how you don't have homework, and just make sure that your files are syncing in a safe place. That's all I'm really asking. Okay. So, ways for getting around Canvas. I have a specific way that I structure the names of my assignments, so you can very quickly at a glance understand how they relate to one another. So if we look in the modules here, you see week 2. There's a unit 0 and then some part 0, stuff like that is all connected underneath this unit 0 page that we're currently reading. Each one of my Canvas naming schemes is going to have 4 key pieces so that you can quickly understand what each of them means. It's going to have the grading category, the unit, the step in the unit that it's a part of. So if you've missed class, you want to follow in this order by counting up, and then the project name, which will make more sense once we get to the naming scheme. So if we look at part 0.1, the unit 0 quiz, you can see all 3 of these, or all 4 of these pieces in action. Participation is the grading category. That's the 10% worth of your grade. 0 is going to be the unit number because it's unit 0. 0.1 is the first step in that unit. And then the project name is following the parentheses. So you can quickly tell, oh, this assignment's worth 10% of my grade. It's from unit 0. It's the first thing I'm supposed to do. I'm going to start here with whatever unit 0's got going on. And we'll get into that here in just a second. Okay. Any questions on these 4 pieces? If you've taken my courses before, you're familiar with these. If not, no worries. I can help you through it. Yeah, Zahid.
How do you know how much it affects your grade?
So it's in the syllabus. Part is 10%, assignments are 30%, projects are 50%, and the final is 10%. That's what. But it is also in the grading section of the syllabus. Hello. Who goes? Hi. We're in the Zoom room. I'll say Kira. Do you have a pass? Do you have a pass? Okay, fine. No worries. Okay. So does that make sense? Okay, I'll move on. So if you've taken my course before, the naming scheme has changed ever so slightly. But if you've not taken any of my classes before, this might be kind of new to you. I mentioned that there's ways to experiment with different ways to kind of name and organize your files, or lack thereof. But there is a required file naming scheme for this course. And that scheme is your first initial, and then your last name, and then your class period number, underscore to separate these 2 pieces of information, the project name, and then the version number. That looks like a lot of information, especially when it's all spelled out in a big line like this. But it's going to look something like this once you guys start actually applying projects and you start doing assignments and stuff like that. It's going to be looking like this. So it's just got your first initial, last name, class period number, and then the first project, and it's version number 1 because we haven't changed anything yet. It gets pretty small. The project name is always going to be found in the Canvas name, so you can see that these line up here. This will be graded on your first couple projects, and the reason that you miss out on full points in future projects, and project name is always going to be the name of the Canvas assignment. Little explanation for the reason of this. It's just because there's so many different files moving back and forth in the graphic design world. It's helpful to have a handle on how to organize things so that you and your client can quickly understand how each piece relates to one another. Yada, yada. You can use the scheme in other classes. I use this scheme for every file in my life, but that's just me because I'm maybe too organized. And I encourage you guys to experiment with what works for you. But for the purpose of practice and for this class, this is the required naming scheme for when you submit your final projects. You can call your projects in between the start and the finish, whatever you want them. But when you submit them to Canvas, they need to be in this scheme, is my only real rule on that. Okay, the last thing, the two main programs that we're going to be using are Photoshop and Illustrator. There are a key difference between each of these programs, and that is the way that they handle their files. I put some links here explaining each of the three file types, or not each of the three, but the two file types are here, and then here's a difference between the two, kind of breaking down if you want to read that. The basic gist is that Photoshop files, PSs, are pixel-based. So pixels, those little dots on your screen that change color when you give them specific instructions, are called rasters, R-A-S-T-E-Rs. I think it's German for grid. Is a German designer, I can't remember his name, came up with this book called Raster Systems, and it was a way to do graphic design on a grid so that it was really easy to lay out the pieces and get a really nice looking result. So now we use the term raster to define pixels. The basic gist of rasters is that when you edit them, you are changing the recipe of pixels that happen on your screen. Typically used in stuff like photography and older digital works, as well as print. And the big thing to remember is that rasters do not resize well as vectors do. If you try to imagine scaling a picture up really big, it gets really blurry. That's because it's rasters and you're affecting the actual position on the screen. Okay, vectors are math-based in quotes because instead of being actual dots on the screen, actually changing the way that those dots look, you're more or less representing those dots with a mathematical equation on like a function as compared to an actual map. So there's some examples here. If you click on this, we go to the Wikipedia page for vectors. You can see the difference here. This is a raster graphic where each of these specific colors is a specific piece of instructions that the computer is reading, whereas the vector graphic just has kind of a general outline of where the pieces are supposed to go based on these things called anchor points. And it's doing some math to get the curves or the colors that fill in between those anchor points, which result in a much smoother and much more nice looking, less blurry image that scales up and down really well. That's a big key difference between rasters and vectors. I want you guys to think about it like this. Rasters are maps on your computer screen that change a pixel's color, and a vector is a mathematical representation of an image because it's the combination of all the different anchors and paths and whatever. That is all Illustrator related. So Illustrator uses vectors. Whenever I use the AI abbreviation, I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I'm talking about Adobe Illustrator. And then Photoshop is typically abbreviated as PS for shorthand. That's easy to understand. Okay, last thing before I quit yakking. I know this is so boring. This is super not interesting. To contact me, you can reach me by either of my ISD emails. I have two. You have my Issaquah one, and then I have bblakeneyisd@gmail. Is another way to get a hold of me. You can call my classroom phone if you really, really need to. There's the number there. But Canvas messages is going to be the fastest way that you guys actually are able to get a hold of me outside of class if you ever need to. Okay, your job now is to go to this part 0.1 unit 0 quiz. You can look back at the page that we just came from. You get 4 attempts because I had to add one because I accidentally did the answers wrong. It's going to give you your correct answers right after. It will take your highest grade. So give this a couple shots. Try to get the highest grade possible. That's due by Friday, so you can go ahead and get started on that. And then in about 10 minutes or so, I'll talk about the discussion board. And then those are our 2 things before we have some examples of what project we're going to be working on next. So go ahead and take this quiz. Remember, it takes your highest score. And it will show you the answers, the correct answers after you finish it up. So go ahead and get started on that. We're still working on that quiz. But once you finish that, if you've already finished up, we go back to the thread. That's from first period. Close this. Go back to our thread for P6. The next thing I want you guys to look at is this part 0.2, because it's next in the series for Unit 0, and it's in that participation category. There's a discussion board here called Skills and Jobs for Graphic Design. So what I want you to do once you finish the quiz is read any of these links or all of them about jobs that focus on graphic design skills specifically, not just graphic design, but the skills that are covered in graphic design. And then for your discussion post, I want you to answer these two questions. Number one, tell us which skills from the article you chose you think would be most important to your possible future career and why are they important? And then tell us which job you would pick and why if you're interested in graphic design. Keep in mind that these salaries are extremely limited and broad and do not reflect actual senior level positions, or depending on where you're at, they haven't been adjusted, right? So don't base your answer on the salary alone. Salary is just some extra information that we can work with later on. After you've posted, respond to at least one classmate. See if you can find something in common between your likes, your dislikes, the importance of the skills that you chose about this field that you can share about. So it's worth a total of 4 points. You get 1 point per question answered, so 2 for the questions. You get 1 point for posting it all to replying to the board. And then the final 4th point is from replying to at least one classmate. So once you finish the quiz and then you do part 0.2, those are the last 2 things that we need to do before I show you guys some examples of the project that we're going to start tomorrow. I know you're still working, so this is just some examples of the, feel free to look or to wait to check these out later. They'll be in the Zoom room. But if you're curious about the first project that we're going to get started with, it's going to look something like this. We're talking about some of the foundational skills of art as a whole. So let me mute this real quick. We're going to be focusing on line as one of the idea of line as compared to online, like on the internet. So your guys' first project using Adobe Illustrator is the first program we're going to be focused on for the most part. You have 3 different lines that you're going to be creating. I will show you how to do each one of these. And the gist is basically we're covering 3 really important skills to graphic design. This first one is vectorizing, where you take an image and you turn it into a vector so that you can scale it up and down really easily. This one's a YouTube tutorial that you're welcome to follow, or you're welcome to create your own. Just covering a lot of really basic skills and practicing Adobe Illustrator. If you've not used it before, this is a good kind of way to start experimenting with a couple of the different tools and the ways that the program works. And then this finally is creating something called an art brush. It's creating like a texture and a pattern that you'll make out of these pieces. And I'll show you how to make these pieces as well, and how you can combine them into this cool kind of retro line sort of situation. So I'm just going to scroll through a couple examples from my first couple years, or my first couple semesters of teaching graphic design. You can see people took it in a variety of different directions, changing up the font, changing up some of the details on the logs, the density of the mountain shadow. We'll avoid stuff like this. This is just a little bit of extra white space, but what I want you guys to think about before you come to class on Wednesday is what type of image you want to vectorize, because you get the choice as long as it's school appropriate. Like this is an axe, for example. This was like a rose. This one we'll avoid. You can see there's a cupcake hidden in here. You can see it on the big screen a lot better than on the Zoom room. But I'll teach you how to vectorize, how to create an art brush, and how to create this kind of logo situation so that you can start adding to your graphic design portfolio right off the bat. So, this one's really cool. Let's see if I can. Okay. With that being said, I'm going to wrap up the Zoom room. That's the last of the things I need to show you today. Your responsibilities are these 2 things. The the only 2 pieces of Unit 0, this Unit 0 quiz and the skills and jobs for graphic design. You have until Friday to turn that in for full credit. So do it before then. You can finish before the end of this period, and then we'll start an official project tomorrow. So I'm itching to begin as well. Okay, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it very much.